these funds. Questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Bonnie, come on down. Thank you for your patience. If I knew about the box of cookies tradition, I would certainly have provided one for you.
I should get a prize, shouldn't I? Although I wasn't here the whole day like you. I'm the lone citizen, joined by a lot of other very expert testimony. It has been an endurance for all of you, and I'd like to thank you for letting me speak at this late hour.
Thank you for your patience.
I have also had some endurance on the issue that I want to speak about, so that's why I was willing to stay a little longer.
Okay.
I started with good afternoon, but I'll have to say good evening now. My name is Bonnie Lichak. I've come today with the request that the Assembly take a much broader look at the DEC. The decisions of the purse greatly impact DEC's ability to protect our environment, but there is so much more the legislature can do. DEC needs not only adequate funding, but also streamlined rulemaking and the ability to advance a strong legislative agenda. Shrinking resources make these changes more important than ever. The legislature needs to listen to the experts at DEC rather than second-guessing them or listening to the lobbyists who don't necessarily have the protection of our air and water as their goal. In my interactions with DEC, I have seen a staff that is very knowledgeable and very dedicated, but overworked and bombarded with politics to the point they are precluded from doing the job of protecting our environment. And I'm specifically really talking about air resources. The DEC must have your full support to stay in front of the constant challenges. Most New Yorkers do not realize the DEC has suffered a staff loss of 23% since 2007 and 8. And I think we can all recognize from today that they do far more than most of us ever really realize. This cut has impacted the very air we breathe. Here in Region 4, air resources staff have been reduced from 8 to 6. I hope that's right. That's the info I got. At the same time, the DEC has had ongoing staffing cuts. They've had to deal with the additional rulemaking loop of the Governor's Office of Regulatory Reform. The intent of GOER was to lessen the regulatory burden on business, but the impact has been that many valuable and necessary regulations are locked in an endless rewrite. This process drains DEC's limited staff and often results in a rule or regulation that is a shadow of its former self. Not all rules and regulations can be modified for the benefit of business. A case in point is Part 247, a rule to address the very serious air pollution of outdoor wood boilers. The rulemaking was started when the EPA failed to put in place emission standards after the New York State Attorney General's office issued its 2005 report, Smoke Gets in Your Lungs. An excellent read to know what's going on out there. We are now approaching 6 years with no results. This is a prime example of how the legislature should have formed a partnership with the agency experts at the AG's office, the DEC, and the Department of Health. Had this been done, I'm confident the legislature would have passed an emission standard. New York is years behind schedule. In fact, they're 20 years behind schedule. The state of Washington has had an emission standard which they passed after the EPA issued indoor wood burner regulations. So they've never had to face this outdoor wood boiler issue. I'm here today because the DEC staff cannot handle more staff cuts, but more importantly, they can't handle the complaints they're receiving as a result of the estimated 35,000 OWBs in New York. That's the number the staff have told me. The staff cuts, regulatory gridlock, and lobbying are being felt in an awful way by New Yorkers that just want their clean air back. I have here a pile of letters, which I just picked up today from my 7 hours of going through the DEC's Part 247 comments. And I know many of you probably received many form letters that were generated by the outdoor wood boiler owners, which were generated because they have warranty cards and the manufacturers sent in, sent to all of their people form letters so they could send them to you. Unfortunately, these people, and I'm here to represent these people because it seems like no one else is really representing them. I'm sorry. If you read these letters, you will be upset because no one is listening to these people. these boilers and the people that are subjected to them, they don't know where to turn. I wouldn't be aware of this issue had one not been next door to me. The DEC shut it down. It took us over 3 years from the time that we first contacted the DEC for that to occur. And it didn't occur right away either. They have to do an opacity reading. I don't know if you know about opacity readings, but it's quite a little archaic system that they use to shut these things down. And the thing is that this is not being done consistently across the state. There's uneven enforcement, there's uneven education. I mean, I understand, I went to those hearings, I heard what those boiler people said. They've been given a short end of the stick here too. The AG's office had started to look into this, and I don't know whatever happened with that, but I mean, this is definitely a serious product faux pas. I don't know how else to say it. That really needs to be handled. We're now so many years in, and people have been suffering for so long that it's a big, big mess to clean up. And the mess is going to continue because this government works very slowly. We all know how slowly government works. And the EPA is tied up in just as many knots. Unless we get smart and have an emission standard, there's always going to be something else that's going to come along. And the DEC drowns in trying to deal with this. We don't have the resources as a state or as a federal government to have people, boots on the ground, to go out and check everything. So you got to have good laws to begin with, and we do not have that in New York State. You know, I'd move to Washington if I could at this point because it's heartbreaking. All right, I got my piles of letters. They speak about the loss of the quality of life, serious health issues, and yet no one in the DEC has the staff resources to stop the pollution. Is this the kind of New York we want to live in? I only have one copy of this because that's all I could print out on my machine without my husband killing me for the ink. This is a new report that just came out from Environmental and Human Health Incorporated. It's on their website. I'll give you the one copy I have. Sure. But you can read this. It's basically a report that they did before that they've now done in much nicer format, and along the sides of each page they have quick little things, so even busy guys like you could quick read through this and see what the serious issues are. I'm going to go through these, and I'm going to try to separate them by regional office, put them in a PDF, and send them out to the living world. And I have started to communicate with some of these people because they don't know how they can get their clean air back. You have no idea what it is to live downwind of one of these things and not be able to go out in your yard and do basic things like play with your child in your yard, hang up your laundry, eat on your deck. I mean, these are simple things that the state of New York should be protecting for people. That's it.
Thank you. We'll, you know, give us the website, and we'll print out the copy so that you don't have to give up yours or make your husband unhappy. But let me ask you, how do you feel about the proposed regulations that DEC put forward on the wood burners?
I think there were two parts to what was originally proposed. One was to deal with the existing boilers, which was to allow them to continue for a set period of time and then be retired. I think that's a non-recognition of really what DEC knows, which is these boilers do not meet their current air regulations. We don't have really good, clear air regulations, so they go out and they do this opacity testing. You go over 20%, you're a violation. They've shut stoves down with 35% violations. Ours next door to us blew as high as 100%, but then they use an average. So, you know, the saying that you're going to allow this to continue for these people for another 5 to however many years is criminal. I mean, I think they don't really have, their policy says that we're supposed to have this database, but I foiled and foiled and foiled, and they don't seem to have a good database. And, you know, sometimes they say, well, we'll just put up a higher stack. Well, you have to worry about downwashing from buildings, you know, the terrain, the trees. You can't get the stuff away. The other part of the regulation is really, I think it's somewhat of a twist on what the Phase 2 EPA voluntary program rules are, but I think they snuck some other stuff in there to try to maybe make it a little bit more. But those Phase 2 stoves, they certify them by using kiln-dried red oak, perfectly stacked, perfect air, and then they do that reading. It's an average. If you look at the AG report, in the front of the report, they have the average for the output is like 71.6. But if you flip back to the appendix, it tells you there was as much as 269 grams an hour of particulate coming out of this stove. So, you know, you can kind of do a lot with numbers, but that 269 is the possibility because you can't, you know, DEC was going to try to control what people burn. Well, how are you going to do that? You don't have enough staff now to do what you need to do. So I don't see how that's going to really bring us what we need. And then you're only dealing with an appliance. You're not dealing with the real issue of the emissions, which is the real issue. Indoor wood stoves, by the EPA standards, catalytic converted stoves, 4.1 grams. So even if you go with a Phase 2 and you pretend that that is true, what that Phase 2 stove is at 18 grams, it's more than 4 times. We can't really afford to put that stuff in the air. I mean, the number of kids that have asthma now keeps growing. And I think, you know, we need to get smarter. And the way to get smarter is to really have an emission standard so that we stop this. You know, and the pressure of the industry is, you know, the little guy thinks that you and the DEC are working for them. They don't have anybody else to represent them. Right. So I you know, voted against the regulation. I mean, it was kind of crazy. It was like I was in agreement with the people that were screaming about it, but it was poorly worded and isn't going to resolve the problem because they don't have the staff to take care of it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for taking the time and for your patience today.